Keith Urban's much-anticipated appearance on The Kelly Clarkson Show took an unexpected turn when a lighthearted conversation spiraled into a tense and awkward exchange, ultimately leading the country music star to storm off the set. The incident began innocently enough, with Kelly warmly greeting Keith and engaging in friendly banter about his latest album and upcoming tour. However, a question about the pressures of fame struck a nerve, and Keith's demeanor noticeably shifted. At first, Keith tried to keep his responses light, offering short but polite answers. Kelly, sensing the tension, attempted to pivot to a different topic, but the atmosphere had already shifted. The audience, who moments before had been laughing and clapping, fell silent as the conversation became more serious. Keith began speaking candidly about the challenges of balancing his career with his personal life, his tone becoming increasingly intense. Kelly, trying to keep the interview engaging, posed a follow-up question that hinted at recent tabloid rumors surrounding Keith. Some people say the spotlight can bring out the worst in relationships. How do you deal with that? She asked with a half smile. Keith froze for a moment, his expression tightening before replying. It's one thing to talk about my music, Kelly, but my marriage is off limits. The tension in the room was palpable. Kelly quickly clarified that she hadn't meant to pry, insisting she was only referencing his resilience in the face of public scrutiny. Keith, however, seemed unconvinced. I've dealt with this my whole career, he said, leaning forward in his seat. But I came here to talk about my work, not my private life. His voice, though calm, carried a sharp edge. Producers backstage shifted uneasily, unsure whether to intervene. Kelly attempted to diffuse the situation with humor, saying, "Well, your work is amazing, so let's talk about how you keep writing such great songs." But Keith shook his head slightly, appearing frustrated. "It's not about songs right now," he said firmly. "It's about boundaries and knowing when they are being crossed." The exchange grew heavier, and the audience's initial shock turned into an awkward silence. Keith began discussing how celebrity interviews often push into areas that have nothing to do with artistry. "It's exhausting," he said, glancing briefly toward the cameras. "People forget that we're human beings first." Kelly nodded sympathetically, but seemed unsure of how to steer the conversation back to safer ground. When Kelly tried to transition into a performance segment, Keith hesitated. He sat quietly for a moment, visibly debating whether to proceed. Then, in a move that stunned both the studio audience and viewers at home, he said, "You know what? I think we're done here." Gasps rippled through the crowd as Keith stood up from his chair. Kelly's eyes widened in surprise, and she reached out as if to persuade him to stay. "Keith, wait," she began, but he was already walking toward the edge of the set. The cameras followed as he disappeared behind the stage curtain, leaving Kelly alone in her chair. For a few seconds, the studio remained silent. Kelly looked directly at the camera, took a breath, and tried to lighten the mood by saying, "Well, that doesn't happen every day." The audience responded with uneasy laughter, still processing what they had just witnessed. Backstage, Keith reportedly told producers that he had warned them in advance not to touch on certain personal subjects. He felt blindsided by the direction the interview took, and despite Kelly's attempts to steer away, the damage was done. Sources close to the show claimed it was a simple misunderstanding, blown out of proportion. Those close to Keith insisted it was about respect. Clips of the confrontation quickly began circulating on social media, with fans taking sides. Some criticized Kelly for asking a question that could be interpreted as invasive, while others argued that Keith's reaction was unnecessarily dramatic. Within hours, the hashtag Keith Urban walks off began trending on Twitter. In the days that followed, entertainment outlets debated the incident endlessly. Some call it an example of how talk shows sometimes walk a fine line between curiosity and intrusion. Others saw it as a reminder that celebrities, no matter how successful, have boundaries that deserve to be respected. Keith himself posted a short statement on his Instagram, thanking fans for their support and explaining that he needed to stand up for personal boundaries, even in public. He did not mention Kelly by name, but the implication was clear. "Music is my gift to the world," he wrote, "but my personal life is mine." Kelly also addressed the incident briefly on her next show, saying she had nothing but respect for Keith and that she hoped they could move past the awkward moment. She emphasized that live television is unpredictable and sometimes things don't go as planned. Behind the scenes. Sources revealed that Kelly reached out privately to Keith to apologize for any unintended offense. Whether or not the apology was accepted remains unclear, but those who know both stars say there's a chance they will work together again in the future if trust can be rebuilt. Fans of both artists expressed disappointment that the interview ended the way it did, noting that the two had collaborated and shared the stage in the past without issue. Many hoped the incident would serve as a learning moment for talk show hosts and guests alike. Industry insiders also weighed in, noting that these moments, while uncomfortable, can spark important conversations about privacy, respect, and the nature of celebrity culture. The line between personal and public has never been thinner, one media expert said, and this is a perfect example of why clarity matters before the cameras roll. Meanwhile, footage of Keith's abrupt exit continued to rack up millions of views online. Some fans joked about the drama, creating memes and GIFs, while others called for more sensitivity toward public figures during interviews. By the end of the week, the story had already become a staple of entertainment news segments, with pundits debating whether Keith's walk-off was justified or overblown. The incident became another reminder that even in the polished world of daytime TV, unscripted moments can change everything. Kelly, ever the professional, seemed determined not to let the walk-off define her show. She continued filming new episodes, bringing in guests from all corners of the entertainment world. Still, the shadow of Keith's departure lingered in the minds of her audience. For Keith. The days after the walk-off were spent focusing on his music. He returned to the studio, pouring his energy into songwriting and rehearsals for his upcoming tour. His fans, loyal as ever, rallied around him with messages of support. As time passed, the incident began to fade from the headlines, replaced by newer celebrity dramas. But for those who witnessed it live, the image of Keith Urban walking away from Kelly Clarkson's set remained unforgettable. Even now, months later, some fans still speculate about what might have happened if the conversation had stayed on safer ground. Perhaps Keith would have performed, the audience would have cheered, and the episode would have been remembered for music rather than controversy. Instead, the moment became a cultural talking point, reminder that boundaries, once crossed, can have immediate and visible consequences, even under the bright lights of television. And while the cameras have long since stopped rolling, the echoes of that tense exchange between Kelly Clarkson and Keith Urban remain a part of talk show lore, a story that fans and insiders will retell for years to come.